Can I ask you then, Steven, that I'll share an example that I remember speaking to Ferran Soriano, the the City chief exec that had been responsible for when Guardiola took over at Barcelona. And one of the criteria that he said he used when he looked at him was they looked at it through three lenses. One was credibility, so did he have knowledge? One was around the kind of energy and enthusiasm for the job, but then the third one was the role of integrity that he had to so if you're asking players to do a certain thing, you couldn't be seen to be a hypocrite. You had to be role modelling the behaviours that you're asking everyone else to buy into.
Yeah.
So what are those behaviours that you're asking people to buy into?
I think early on, as you talk about a culture, I think you have standards on the training pitch. You have standards that you're expecting a game, but it's also a daily thing, what you're asking the players, how they behave, what standards you expect of them, the standards you believe in, your non-negotiables and stuff. And
so what are they?
Basically, who we're representing Rangers, who are built on winning and standards and history and tradition, and a lot of legends, managers, players have gone before us. We have a responsibility to carry on that tradition and them standards. I want people to come to work. It has to be enjoyable. It has to be. But there needs to be a realisation from the players to know when do we enjoy this and when do we work. And I think once the players understand that balance of, yes, I want you to skip into work, you've got to have energy, you've got to enjoy it, you've got to bring something. But when the whistle goes and we work, we all have to commit and give everything we've got. And that's how we go about it in terms of our culture.
And how do you deal with players that don't do that?
I deal with every player the same, Jake. I try and show them respect and honesty. That's the way I've been brought up, even outside of football. Try and be respectful, try and be honest. I think you've got to realise you're not going to get everything right. You're not going to get every signing right. Not every player that you take over is going to be perfect for you or fit into how you play or what you want. That doesn't mean they're a bad player or a bad person. So I think if you have real, honest and respectful communication with everyone, sometimes you have to tell them stuff they don't want to know. But I think eventually they'll realise that you've done it for the best of the club.
That was informed by your time as a player, that you had managers who were totally open with you and were warm with you and brought you in, and then you had managers who were much colder and you weren't really sure where you stood with them, and you found that difficult perhaps.
Yeah, I've never really tried to copy a manager to a T. I've tried to take different things from all of them, but I liked it and I preferred it when a manager looked me in the eye and was honest. So if I was good, I wanted the manager to tell me I was good. If I needed to do stuff better and improve, I wanted the manager to look at me in the eye and go, I think you can do better, I think you can do more. Sometimes that puts a lump in your throat when you hear something that you maybe don't want to hear.
Yeah.
But in your own time, if you're a proper athlete, performer or I think you need to respect that.
So what was the one bit of feedback that you received off a coach that maybe was difficult, that you feel had the biggest difference on your performance?
Rafa Benitez was probably the one that took my game to the next level. I thought I was a really, really good player when Rafa come in, but I probably wasn't. And he noticed pretty early that I needed to improve positionally. Discipline, sort of when to run forward, how many times are you running forward, what are you leaving behind when you run forward. Sometimes you don't have to run forward, sometimes the job's different. And it was that game understanding of, your role in the team, being more of a team. I was someone who was full on, full of energy, go and do as much as I can, how many times I'm going to make the box, how many crosses I'm going to get in, how many shots. And I was more of a, whereas he got me to become more of a team player, more game aware, what positions, understand the tactical side of it, who we playing against.
And why did you find that difficult to hear?
Because I thought I was all right. I thought I was fine, I was 23, I think, at the time. I was scoring goals. I was playing well. The fans like me, but football's about levels, and he's trying to get me to become one of the best midfielders in Europe. He's wanting me to, you know, not just for me to be maybe a good player domestically. He wants to make me a top-class player, and I think a top-class player has different things to the game. It's not just about your talent and your strengths. It's about an understanding of the game, how the game works, phases within the game, the tactical side of it. You know, like what are the opposition going to do, and who you're up against, and that's the reason why it's such a fascinating game. But he is the most fascinating and the most tactically aware manager that I ever played
So
under.
how would you deal with a player then that was either in that comfort zone of I'm happy just being a good player and you're trying to take me to another level and I don't want to go, or somebody that is deluded that at the level that they think they're at? How would you handle that now?
I think as a player you've got that option. You either take advice on board and you're open to improve little small areas to try and go. I think as a footballer you can never stop learning and growing.
But as a coach, how would you handle that footballer that didn't want to be there?
I talk to them, and well, it's a choice. I'd never force a player to change his game. I'd never force a player to do anything. I'd chat to him. You know, you're open. This is what we see. I'd maybe back up what I'm trying to do with what I'd seen. If a player's performing really well and strong and I think he's fine, I'll leave him be. Let him crack on. I think you'd only try and improve a player if you see things or there's evidence where you think he can do things slightly different, which will elevate his game. But we get massive buy-in from every player at any age to improve, because I believe I've got a fantastic staff and I've got an environment which is a learning environment. And we don't care whether you're 18 or 38. If we see something that we're still having chats with Jermaine Defoe, little certain things. Jermaine Defoe's an unbelievable player, unbelievable athlete. But Jermaine Defoe wants to make the most of what's left, and he's open for dialogue and chat and blah blah blah. But you get that buy-in if you've got the right environment.
So do you think you could have gone and coached at a lower level then? Or do you think you almost needed to go into a level where you had that kind of elite mentality?
Yeah, I think so. Look, there might be times during this journey moving forward where it might take me where I have to do that. But if you ask me what my preference would be, it'd be to work at the top and stay as high and be around the best players I can possibly be around. That's not being disrespectful to levels of the game. Yeah. Not at all. I watch all levels of the game. I watched the game the other night, Harrogate v Bradford. Full game, watched the game. It was the only game that was on the telly. But I watched it. I don't disrespect levels of the game, but for me, my buzz and my ambition is to stay as high as I can.
Do you think it's harder for players or easier for players under you that you had such a good career?
I think different players probably handled it initially differently. Yeah. I think some people were in a shell, a little bit maybe intimidated in the early days, early weeks. I think they were hanging on to every word and also really open to see what I was going to be like. I think they were fascinated. What's he going to be like? He's new. He hasn't been anywhere before. So I think the first 2-3 weeks of me going in at Rangers were probably the most important 2-3 weeks.
After all you've achieved, were you still nervous at that point?
Very. Extremely. I think addressing the Rangers squad for the first time, probably one of the most nervous talks I've ever done.
Really?
Yeah. And I've heard it said that managers have often said that players will test you at some stage. They want to know where the line is or what the standards are.
Well, you can't. I don't think you can pull the wool over footballers' eyes.
So what was the first
Maybe
test
you might be able to get away with it once, or maybe a certain individual you might be able to bend the truth or try and think. But I think as a group of footballers, Certainly when you've got experienced players in the room, they'll work you out pretty fast.
But what was the first test they set for you that you can recognise now?
I can't really remember one off the top of my head, but I think your tactics for your first game, I think they're really wanting to know what your style is going to be.
Right.
You know, are you going to be a defensive coach? Are you going to be an attacking coach? You know, how's he going to set us up? What formations are he going to use? I think the players are really waiting for you to maybe, I don't know whether it fail's the right word, or to get something wrong, or you do feel like, certainly in the first few months, everything's a test and all eyes, it's like their eyes are burning you, waiting for you to get something wrong. So it was a very important stage, the first few months, to sort of get their trust.
And how connected does your management career feel to your playing career? Do you think that you basically, without knowing it at the time, you spent your playing career learning things that you're now putting into practice every day?
Yeah, for sure. I think the career I've had definitely shaped me. A lot of the standards that I've lived by and worked under, a lot of the non-negotiables that managers have gave me, I've tried to bring in. You know, we have a leadership group. I like the dressing room to run itself. There's a lot of things, yeah. I'd say the majority of the things I've learned through my playing career I try and use in the way I manage.
So can I ask you about the leadership group then? Because your role as a player here at Liverpool always intrigues me, that you were seen as, like we often use the phrase on this podcast around being a cultural architect, so a leader without necessarily having the title of it, that you defend the standards, you call people out when they're not doing it. And you weren't worried about necessarily being popular. It was about doing the right thing rather than...
Yeah, I wasn't someone who called people out in front of groups. I'd never try and belittle anyone or disrespect anyone. I think it's important that people don't think I was this type of leader who'd make people feel crap. I was someone who'd speak to people more in 1v1 situations, or I'd address the group and say, this is what I believe in, this is what I think's right, this is what we, you know, and I'd have a strong opinion, but I was never the type of leader who would be forceful or try and intimidate or do that style.
But I've heard it said about you though, Stephen, that some players were very aware where they stood in your level of respect. So there's some players that said they were very aware that you didn't approve of them or you didn't rate them.
No, well, I don't think that's important whether I rate them or not. I think the important thing when you're in the industry and in the dressing room is who's going to help you win football matches, who's going to help you be successful. I can't control whether a player thinks I rate them or whether I accept them. I don't really think that's important.
What were you like though? Because now you're a manager, it's okay to be clear about your opinion. What were you like as a player with players that you didn't think were doing their all for the cause like you were?
Well, it'll depend. I think if they were trying and giving everything they've got.
If they weren't though?
If they weren't, I think your job as the captain of Liverpool, if someone's not pulling the weight or is letting the team down or letting the club down, I think it's my job to let them know. But as I say, I had a style and a way of doing that. You know, a dressing room's an environment where everyone's entitled to say what they want. The Liverpool dressing room was always that way. People always think that me and Jamie Carragher were these kings of the castle and it was just about us two. It certainly weren't. We had a lot of experienced players in that dressing room and I think we were all on the same page in terms of what we expected from all the individuals in the room and who we were representing. If there was someone in there who weren't pulling the weight or letting everyone else down, it wasn't just me. I think the coaching staff with the likes of Sammy Lee and Phil Thompson and the managers we played under, they'd be identified pretty quickly and they wouldn't be around for very long. And that's just the way it is.
That process of learning not to be selfish and then start to look at the wider group and the impact of it is a journey that you obviously went on. That, like when Jake was asking you around, as a kid you were focused on, I'm getting my place in that team and I'm not going to surrender it. And that was very much around your own drives and your own ambitions. When did that process of learning to sacrifice yourself for the wider group take place for you in your career, and how do you then teach your players that?
I think it was initially when I was given more responsibility by my coach or my coaches, maybe being given the armband, for example. I was given the captaincy at 23. I remember having conversations with Gerrard and Phil Thompson, and the early conversations of getting given the captaincy. Now you're going to have to start thinking about other people, because I think becoming a footballer at a professional level, a lot of it is about you and getting yourself right, doing the right things on and off the pitch to make sure your performance is good. Yeah, you're part of a team, but your job is to make sure that you contribute and bring your strengths to that team. I think as I came towards 23, 24 and I become Liverpool captain, I probably had to carry on doing that, but also adapt into someone who is there for other people, support other people. And that took time. That didn't happen overnight. I didn't all of a sudden become this person who everyone could bounce off. I had to become a better leader, a better person, whilst maintaining my own high standards.
So what sort of help or advice or support did you get to be able to make that mental transition?
I couldn't have done it without Jamie Carragher or Sammy Appiah. I replaced Sammy. I think his reaction was first class. Jamie was a natural leader as well. Different type of leader for me, maybe a bit more vocal. He had his own, obviously, traits of his own leadership. But having the support and the backing of them, even though they were older and more experienced than me, certainly helped me blossom into a better leader.
So how would you help a player now at Rangers make that transition from being selfish to seeing the bigger picture?
I think I have. We named a new captain. I'd obviously seen stuff from the outside at Rangers, but you know, we named a new captain in James Tavernier, and we knew he was a fantastic player, and he was quite consistent, and he had respect from the other players in terms of a player. Myself and Gary and the other coaching staffs have tried to help James become a leader in other areas as well, and try and give him that support and help him blossom as a leader as well from our own experiences, you know. But I think that's not just me, that's Gary as well, and other people at the club.
Please hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, give us a thumbs up, leave a review, but somehow get involved with the High Performance Podcast and become part of our growing community. Thanks for being part of the adventure.